I was fired for being 5 minutes late. 2 weeks later, my boss begged me to come back with triple my salary. I, 34M, have always been the kind of person who works in the background, the one who keeps things running while others take the credit. For 3 years, I worked at a mid-sized tech company that develops custom software solutions for various industries. My official title was Systems Integration Specialist, but that barely scratched the surface of what I actually did. My direct boss was one of those people who got promoted based on charisma rather than competence. He'd been with the company for 7 years, climbing the ladder by taking credit for others' work and throwing subordinates under the bus when things went wrong. Everyone knew it, but nobody said anything because he had the ear of upper management. The incident happened on a Monday. I was running 5 minutes late because of an accident on the highway that had traffic backed up for miles. 5 minutes. Not an hour, not even 15 minutes. 5. After 3 years of coming in early, staying late, and working weekends without complaint, I rushed into the office at 9:05 a.m., coffee in hand, ready to apologize and get straight to work. But before I could even reach my desk, my boss intercepted me in the hallway, his face already red with that artificial anger managers put on for show. "My office. Now," he said loud enough for the entire floor to hear. I followed him, already knowing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. His office was a corner space with glass walls, perfect for making public spectacles out of private reprimands. "This is the third time this month you've been late," he said as soon as the door closed. It wasn't. I'd been late once before, 2 weeks ago, when my elderly neighbor needed emergency help getting to her car for a doctor's appointment. "Actually, it's the second time," I started. "Don't argue with me. I keep track of these things," he interrupted, tapping his monitor for emphasis, though I doubted he had any actual documentation open. "We've talked about your punctuality issues before, and clearly those conversations haven't made an impression." We hadn't. Not once in 3 years. "There was an accident on the highway," I explained calmly. "I couldn't control that." "You should leave earlier to account for these possibilities," he countered, as though I should predict traffic accidents. "Everyone else managed to get here on time." That wasn't true either. At least 3 other people on my team had walked in after me, but they weren't on my boss's radar the way I was. "Look," he continued, leaning forward over his desk, "this company needs reliable people. I've been watching your performance slip for months now." Another lie. Just last week, I'd stayed until 3 a.m. fixing a critical system error that would have cost the company thousands if left until morning. An error that, incidentally, stemmed from a change my boss had insisted on against my recommendation. "I think it's best we part ways," he said, with all the gravity of someone who believed he was being magnanimous. "Today will be your last day. HR will email you the separation paperwork." I sat there in stunned silence. 3 years of dedicated service, countless weekends sacrificed, endless late nights ensuring systems ran smoothly. All ended over 5 minutes. "Can I at least finish the Mitchell project?" I asked, thinking about the client whose system migration I was halfway through. "They're expecting a handover this week." "We'll handle it," he dismissed with a wave of his hand, already turning his attention back to his computer screen. "IT will revoke your access by the end of the day. Please clean out your desk and be gone by lunch." I nodded, stood up, and left his office without another word. What was there to say? I'd just been fired for being stuck in traffic. Back at my desk, I started organizing my things while sending a few critical emails. Not to sabotage anything. I'm not that kind of person, but to document the status of various projects and to make sure critical information wouldn't be lost in my sudden departure. My colleagues watched in confused silence as I packed up 3 years of my professional life into a cardboard box. A few came over to ask what happened, and their expressions when I explained spoke volumes about the company culture we'd all been tolerating. "You can't be serious," one whispered. "Over 5 minutes." I just shrugged. What else could I do? By noon, I was walking to my car, cardboard box in hand, security escort behind me, as though I might steal office supplies on my way out. The humiliation burned, but there was also a strange sense of relief washing over me. Maybe this was the push I needed to find somewhere that would value my contributions. The first week after being fired was actually pleasant. I slept in, caught up on books I'd been meaning to read, and took long walks in the park near my apartment. I updated my resume and sent out a few applications without any real urgency. My emergency fund was solid, a necessity in the volatile tech industry, so I could afford to be selective about my next move. Then the emails started coming in. The first was from a colleague, sent to my personal email. "Hey, nobody can find the documentation for the Mitchell migration. Boss is freaking out. Do you remember where you stored it?" I did, of course. The documentation was comprehensive and stored exactly where our protocol specified, but my boss had never bothered to learn the system. I politely replied with the location. The next day, 2 more emails arrived from different team members. The client portal keeps crashing and nobody knows why. Did you ever document that workaround for the inventory system bug? Again, I provided the information they needed. I wasn't going to punish the company or my former colleagues just because my boss was an incompetent jerk. By the end of the first week, the emails were coming in hourly. Critical systems were failing, clients were getting restless, and apparently, nobody could find half the documentation for the custom solutions I'd built over the years. See, what my boss never understood was that my job title of Systems Integration Specialist didn't begin to cover what I actually did. Over 3 years, I'd become the unofficial technical backbone of multiple departments. When systems didn't talk to each other properly, I made them talk. When legacy software needed to connect to modern platforms, I built the bridges. When clients needed custom solutions that our standard offerings couldn't provide, I created them. And I documented everything meticulously. But in a company where nobody reads documentation unless forced to, that didn't help much in my absence. The second week brought phone calls in addition to emails. First from colleagues, then from team leads, and finally from the department head herself. We're having trouble with several critical systems, she admitted, her voice carefully controlled but clearly stressed. Your boss mentioned you were working on a number of custom integrations before you left. That's right, I confirmed. Everything is documented in the technical wiki, section 3b through 3f. We've looked there, she said. But without context, it's difficult to understand. Some of these systems are quite complex. That was putting it mildly. Some of the integrations I'd built were holding together disparate systems that were never meant to communicate with each other in the first place. Band-aids on band-aids, because the company had always prioritized quick fixes over proper solutions. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely meaning it. I tried to make the documentation as clear as possible. Would you be willing to consult? She asked after a brief hesitation. Just to help us sort through some of these issues. We'd pay your contractor rate, of course. I considered it for a moment. I'll need to think about it, I replied finally. I'll get back to you tomorrow. After hanging up, I checked my email to find 3 more desperate messages from former colleagues, each describing another system on the verge of collapse. Part of me felt validated. Finally, people were realizing how much I'd been doing all along. But another part felt sorry for my team, who were now drowning in problems they hadn't been trained to handle. That evening, I drafted an email to the department head outlining my consulting terms, triple my previous hourly rate, minimum 10 hours guaranteed, and a stipulation that I would work remotely only. No returning to the office where I'd been so unceremoniously dismissed. She agreed to my terms within minutes of receiving the email. My first consulting session was a 4-hour video call with 3 increasingly panicked team members. The Mitchell project migration had gone completely off the rails, with the client threatening to pull their 6-figure contract if things weren't fixed immediately. I walked them through the solutions I'd built, explaining the workarounds I'd implemented to compensate for the limitations in our standard offerings. I could see the dawning realization on their faces as they began to understand just how much custom work had been holding everything together. How did you have time to build all this? One of them asked. This is weeks of work. Nights and weekends. I replied simply. It was the only way to meet the deadlines while making sure everything actually worked. Over the next few days, I conducted similar sessions for different teams, each one revealing another layer of the invisible support structure I'd built throughout the company. Custom APIs that connected incompatible systems, automated workflows that saved hundreds of manual labor hours, security patches that protected vulnerable data endpoints, all created by me in the gaps between my official responsibilities. 1 week into my consulting arrangement, I received an unexpected call. It was my former boss. We need to talk, he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. We're talking now, I replied neutrally. In person, he insisted. This is too important for a phone call. I'm not coming to the office, I stated firmly. If you want to meet, it will have to be somewhere else. We agreed on a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and the company. I arrived exactly on time to find him already there, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down across from him. No small talk, no pleasantries. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. What can I do for you? I asked, keeping my tone professional despite the satisfaction I felt seeing him so obviously stressed. He took a deep breath. I made a mistake. I didn't reply, just waited for him to continue. I didn't realize. I had no idea how much you were actually handling. The systems you built, the clients you were keeping happy. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Everything's falling apart without you. That's unfortunate, I said, still neutral. I left detailed documentation. Documentation isn't enough, he admitted. These systems need someone who understands them, who built them. They need you. I sipped my coffee, letting him squirm a bit longer before responding. I'm already consulting with the department head. The company has access to my expertise. For 10 hours a week, he countered, at 3 times your previous salary. And there are certain things you can only fix if you're back on the internal network. He wasn't wrong. Some of the more sensitive systems couldn't be accessed remotely due to security protocols. What exactly are you proposing? I asked finally. Come back, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. Full-time. We'll increase your salary to match your consulting rate. Create a new position, chief systems architect or something similar. Direct report to the CTO, not to me. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that last part. So, I wouldn't be working under you anymore? No, he confirmed. You'd be technically above me in the hierarchy, actually. That explained his discomfort. He was essentially admitting that I deserved to outrank him. And what happens the next time there's an accident on the highway? I asked pointedly. He had the decency to look ashamed. That was completely out of line. I was dealing with pressure from above about department efficiency, and I took it out on you. It was unprofessional and unfair. It was probably the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I'll need the offer in writing, I said after a moment of consideration. Including flexible working hours, the option to work remotely 2 days a week, and a detailed outline of my new responsibilities. I can make that happen, he nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. When could you start? That depends on the offer, I replied, standing up to signal the end of our conversation. Send it over, and we'll go from there. The offer came through the next day, and it was even better than discussed. Along with the title and salary increase, they'd added stock options and an apology letter from the CEO himself, who apparently had been unaware of my unceremonious dismissal until systems started failing. I took a weekend to think it over, weighing the improved compensation package against the memory of how easily they'd discarded me after 3 years of dedication. In the end, I accepted the offer with a few additional amendments to ensure my new position came with the authority to implement proper solutions rather than just more band-aids. My first day back was surreal. People stopped what they were doing to watch as I walked through the office, no longer carrying a cardboard box, but instead heading to a new corner office with my name freshly printed on the door. My former boss nodded respectfully as I passed his office, and I returned the gesture without breaking stride. The company learned an expensive lesson about recognizing the true value of their employees. And I learned that sometimes, being indispensable isn't about making yourself known. It's about quietly becoming the foundation that everything else depends on. As for my former boss, we maintain a strictly professional relationship now. He's careful never to mention my occasional late arrivals when traffic is bad. And I'm careful never to remind him of the 2 weeks when he discovered exactly what I really did for the company.